Good morning. Today is Wednesday, February 14th, 2007. My name is Philip Laporte. I am the Director of the Labor Studies Program at Georgia State University. Today we will be interviewing Mr. Harry Bexley as part of the Georgia State University's Southern Labor Archives Voices of Labor Oral History Project. Mr. Bexley has agreed to sit for an interview, and we are delighted to have him here with us today. Harry Bexley is the Business Manager Emeritus of Local 613 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Well, Harry, it's great to have you here today. I want to start the interview out with you just telling a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what your parents did, and where you attended school.
Well, let's see. I was born in 1922 in our old homestead, Bexley, Georgia, which I was third generation. My great-grandfather settled there in 1820. Both of my grandparents in the Civil War. And the one on my father's side was discharged, which was interesting, reading his discharge, to come home to make shoes for the Confederacy. His father had a shoe plant. And he was discharged to come home and make shoes for the Confederacy. Failing to do so, he would be considered a deserter. So that was interesting to read all of that history. The price of shoes was $5 a pair for regular shoes and $5.50 for a pair of boots, according to the invoices that we have during that period of time. But anyway, I grew up in Cayuga County, and I went to high school, went to school in Cayuga County, graduated from Star High School, which is located between Sharpsburg, Georgia, and Turin, Georgia. And from there, my first job after completing high school was a payroll clerk, timekeeper for Barge Thompson Construction Company. $25 a week. I thought that was good. But so I did that for maybe a year or so. World War II was getting in full bloom. So a friend and I started taking a welding course so that we could go to work in Savannah, Georgia at the shipyards.
And the year you graduated from high school?
1941.
1941.
So we went to work in Savannah as a pipe welder, so to speak, at the Southeastern Shipyard, Savannah, Georgia. They were building the merchant ships. They call them merchant ships. But the following January, I was drafted into service and completed our boot training in Miami, Florida. That's where I learned to like Florida. And after that went to Europe for 3 years. And upon discharge, on the way back, I met this guy on a boat that father was a part of the IBEW. And he was wondering what I was going to do when I got home. I said, well, I don't have any idea. He said, well, he was going into the electrical industry. He said, you ought to come and try it. So when I got back here, I did. I went down and applied for an apprenticeship. But, and I was sent on a job at 50 cents an hour. And I couldn't live on 50 cents an hour. So I went back in, so I got another job at 75 cents an hour. Big raise.
Yeah.
So my brother-in-law was a lawyer, and they wanted me to go to law school. Now, I was going to apprenticeship school, but it wasn't the type that it is today, of course. And I wasn't getting a whole lot out of that. So I enrolled in law school. Woodrow Wilson College of Law. 3 nights a week, night school. And I kept working on the job and going to law school. In 1948, I finished my law school, passed the bar, and all that time, of course, in the meantime, I was joined the country club, the IBEW. That's what we call it, the country club, because they did not take in the veterans back then. We was about 100 of us couldn't get in. So the International come and put us all into IBEW 613 as in 1948.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where I started then, but I continued my law. After completing my bachelor's degree, I wanted to get in labor law. So I took my master's degree in labor law. And completion of my graduate school of labor law, I started representing IBEW in labor issues. I won several cases for them, and injunctions then was the going problem we had then, because, you know, Taft-Hartley was in full bloom. And they wasn't using the National Labor Relations Board at that time. They were going to state courts, which is the easiest to get an injunction the next day. And my first case was in Gwinnett County, Lawrenceville, Georgia. It's quite an interesting case. I can go out a little detail because it was fun. And I told the business manager to send a picket to me before he put him out on the job, the office. But going back, I went to work for Morgan Stanford. I don't know if you heard of Morgan Stanford or not.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I went in his office, went to work with him, associate, because he had just resigned from the National Labor Relations Board.
Mm-hmm.
And which was great for me, was only one other labor law firm in the city at that time, and that was Poole, Pearson Hall. It was the only labor. Joe Jacobs was coming aboard at that time. But Poole, Pearson Hall was the prime representative of the building trades unions. So I thought Morgan Stanley would be a good associate, so we started out with him in the labor law business. So first the case I had was at Lake Lanier, the powerhouse at Lake Lanier.
Mm-hmm.
Was non-union. And of course the building trades put up a picket and IBEW put up a picket, but before the IBEW I wanted to talk to the picket. I was going to try something new because the language on the picket signs had a lot to do with the injunction. So I told this fella, says, I want you to just take a blank picket, nothing on it. He said, what good is that going to do? I said, well, if they knew anything about a union, they'd know what it meant. And he did this. He walked a picket with nothing on it. Of course, they got the injunction. And the case came up in Lawrenceville, Gwinnett County. And Poole, Pearson Hall was representing the building trades, and I was representing the IBEW. So when the judge called the IBEW up, of course, I called the picket up, put him on the stand. Said, did you bring the picket you were walking? Yes. Would you show it to the judge? The judge looked at the picket. He said, I don't see anything on the picket. I said, Your Honor, that is the issue. He shook his head. And, of course, the case went on until it was completed. And the building trades got enjoined, but the IBEW didn't. Because it had a reason to.
Yeah.
It was.
Harry, do you remember what was on the building trades picket signs?
Yes, it was the, well, it was operating engineers, that was unfair. To that degree, that's what they always put them in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had several other cases. I was representing IBEW and the membership too. And I was a member of the executive board at that time also. I'd been elected to the executive board. I don't know why they would elect me to the executive board. I was a lawyer. But I had passed my journeyman exam in the meantime. So I was a full-fledged journeyman as well. So I had the best of two worlds. So I continued to practice law for Morgan Stanford until the business manager at that time was going to resign. He come to me and wanted to know if I would not come be the legal representative and the business manager of the 613. I said, well, I don't know. I've got it pretty good here. I like what I'm doing. He said, well, give it some thought. So 2 or 3 weeks I thought about it, and we talked it over with the wife, and it was a great challenge. A good place to put labor law into effect. And I finally agreed to do it, and the executive board appointed me legal counsel, business manager for the local union. So that was my entrance into the labor movement as far as the IBEW is concerned.
And Harry, what year were you appointed as legal representative?
1955.
1955. All right. And I just want to go back on a couple of issues. I'm interested in how you managed to go from one job at 50 cents an hour to another job at 75 cents an hour. You must
There
have
was
been...
no set rate for the apprentices. The journeyman rate was only maybe $2.50 to $3 an hour at that time, so there was no insurance, no pension, no anything at that time. But I managed to go to school, finish my law degree and all that stuff. So.
And so you, in 1948, you became, you received your law degree, and you became
A member
a member
of the IBEW.
of IBEW.
Mm-hmm.
So 1948 was a
year.
big year for Harry
I got
Bexley.
married that year too.
Oh my.
I asked the bar that year. 1948 was a great year.
And so you practiced law with Morgan Stanford, which was to become the law firm of Stanford, Fagan, and Giolito.
Later.
Yes.
Later.
For 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And did you represent a variety of different clients?
Yes, I had personal accounts and and one or two the FL and the particularly IBEW. That was a #1 client. So they had enough business to take care of.
Uh-huh.
And we started out then. That's where my labor, as far as the labor part goes.
Mm-hmm.
I continued to do legal work for individuals, so to speak, counseling and what all the time. But then, of course, do legal work for the IBEW as well. Arbitration cases. And I employed we only had probably 600 members, I guess, 700 members at that time. And we just started in the manufacturing part of the electrical industry a little before that. We had maybe 3 companies that the IBEW represented of the manufacturing industry. So from there, we started organizing. I've employed several people, put them out there organizing. And the big plant in the Westinghouse plant in Athens, Georgia, Square D, Federal Pacific, battery plants. Federal Pacific, General Times in Athens. Anaconda Copper. So we grew in that area, in that industry, probably 3,000 members. Had more of them than did construction people, because the construction industry did not want to organize. They didn't want to bring in anybody. But even with that, we did quite a bit in the construction industry as well. So we grew to, I don't know what year, but we got up to 5,000 members at one time, which was quite a feat during those period of time. Now, during that period, we'll pick up with some of the things that we accomplished, I think, for the IBEW and the labor movement here in particular. The Atlanta Labor Council, of course, I was legal counsel for the Georgia State AFL-CIO and the Atlanta Labor Council, along with Judge Buckner, who was, I don't know if you heard that name or not.
I have heard the name of Buckner, yes.
He was on the Workers' Comp Board. And he and I were the co-counsels for the Georgia State and Atlanta Labor Council. So that was interesting as well. And we had tried to get a labor building. But we could never get the group together substantial enough to do the job. So I decided to say we need one. So the IBEW agreed that they would build a building. We were at 10th Street then, which the building association owned. And so we started a building fund.
And that 10th Street building, the Carpenters had their offices there.
Yes.
And it overlooked Piedmont Park.
Correct.
And so IBEW 613 had offices as part of that 10th Street building.
Correct. We were in the Fulton High School. We moved from Fulton High School to there. Started out in the Lady Garment Workers building down on Trinity back in the early 40s. So we started buying up the property. They agreed that area would be okay. And the first building, the first site had to be for the building, because otherwise you wouldn't have enough parking space. So quietly, Fulton County owned the building. It was an apartment complex there, big apartment house. They had taken it in on taxes. And Charlie Brown, you've heard of Charlie Brown,
Yes, sir.
was the chairman of the commissioners. And I went to Charlie and told him I have a plan. And he liked the idea of cleaning up that whole mess down there. So he said he'd sponsor a resolution to sell the building to the IBEW, which he did. And he called me on the phone and said, well, you got your building now. When you going to pay up? I said, what price did you get? He said, I got you a good price. I forget, it wasn't a whole lot, but I snapped it up right quick.
And of course, we're referring to the area that is the
IBEW building.
the current site of the IBEW building at 501 Pulliam Street, which is just across from Turner Field, adjacent to the downtown connector in Atlanta.
Correct.
And Harry, did the purchase then, did it constitute the IBEW office building, or did the parcel of land include the auditorium and the apprenticeship training center?
Oh, no, that was just, all of them were separate 50-foot lots with a alleyway running from downtown all the way down to Georgia Avenue. 10-foot alley. And let's see, we had, must have been 10 other parcels in the 2 blocks. We told no one what we were doing. I'll never forget going down to the jailhouse and getting a deed signed from one of the lots. And And where the auditorium is was a rib shack. So we bought that one, and we only had one holdout in the whole group that was putting it together, and it was a Jewish lady. She lived in Miami. She would not sell. She said, I'm going to build a high-rise on that lot. I said, well, ma'am, it's only 50 foot, and you can't build anything on a 50-foot lot anymore. You can't be zoned. You could never convince her of that, so she finally died, and the daughter was the executive estate, and she sold it right off. So we got that after we built the building. That was the last lot.
Yeah.
We left it just like it was and went all around it, built around it, and we had a drive-in bank there. CNS had a drive-in bank at that time, which was a real successful bank. They had a drive-in in a good location. So they was a great tenant. And we started the building. A lot of naysayers around about building that kind of a building. And but we had good relations with Sam Caldwell, Commissioner of Labor, which was a great guy. I guess one of the most astute politicians we had in the state at that time, including the governor and the rest of them. He was quite a character. And he told me, he says, when you complete the building, I'll take all the space that you don't want for the labor people. So that was quite a good deal for us. And he kept his promise. When we completed the building, we had several other labor organizations that took the office there. Montague, who was president of Georgia State, AFL-CIO, I remember, he got his name there. He told me, says, now, I'll move in the building if you'll give me the northeast corner on the 5th floor. I said, why do you want that? He said, well, I don't see where I can see the Capitol. Maybe I can watch what they're doing. I said, well, it's a deal. And we kept that space open for the Georgia State AFL-CIO. That was originally our IBEW site. But I said, well, we can take the 2nd floor because, you know, beggars can't be choosers. So we gave that to the Georgia State AFL-CIO, and they still have it. Been there all these years. So we paid the building off probably in 3 or 4 years. $1 million and some $1,000. So that was as far as the building is concerned.
Do you remember the year that you first acquired the land in that area?
It was in 65. Thereabouts.
Yes, sir. So it was about the same time the Atlanta Braves came to Atlanta
Exactly
from
right.
Milwaukee.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And of course, we had trouble holding. The state wanted the property after that. MARTA wanted the station. They wanted to put a MARTA station there and all that stuff, but we would not agree to it. The state finally condemned part of it to build a bridge going across there by the building after a bit of fight. But we didn't get what we ought to for it, as you never do on the condemned problem. And then to complete the building, our apprenticeship school was going to the Atlanta Apprenticeship School over on Stewart Avenue. And I'd always meet with the apprentices and they finished it. I asked the group one time what changes would they like to have in their training situation. And they said, we'd like to have our own building where we could have our own techniques and whatnot that we don't have access to over there. And I said, well, let me check it out. And we had $2 million in the kitty. And I told the officers we were going to build our school for our apprentices. And that's when we built the school building. That was in probably 1970, maybe a little before that. So, we leased it to the Apprenticeship Training Committee, which is a separate entity from the IBEW and NECA, who had the parking rights. So we got probably over $1,000 a month rent. I says to keep that rent in education, I want to establish a scholarship fund. And that's when our scholarship fund started, was from the rent from the school building to the Atlanta JATC. And we would have enough to have 10 scholarships a year. Now, we included the management contractors' children as well, as long as they met the requirements. And I guess the scholarship program is still in effect.
Yes, it is.
Which must have been for, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, but it's been quite a thing, and that was quite a feat, I think, for the IBEW to set up that scholarship fund. Now, my mentor starting out in the labor movement was Harry Van Osdale. You've heard of him in New York City.
Yes, sir.
And I spent quite a bit of time in Local 3, New York City. And he took a quite interested in the IBEW in Atlanta, Georgia. And we tried to probably use Local 3 as a pattern to follow, as a lot of locals did.
Well, sure.
So, which was a great help to all of us. And he employed a lot of IBEW people when there was no work around a lot of time, but that was second home to the 613 was Local 3. And we maintained that relationship until his death, and still do, I guess. He was, I'd say, one of the greatest labor leaders we've had in this country, bar none. The only problem he was about 30, 40 years ahead of schedule, so to speak. His ideas and everything was what you dream about, but he put them into effect. It was quite an interesting story that he had, how he ever took over Local 3, which we won't go into details, but it was quite a story that it would be interesting to be on the record.
Mr. Van Arsdale, of course, the Van Arsdale Scholarship is named after him.
Yes.
And he also established the joint program so that every IBEW Local 3 apprentice would also earn an associate degree in labor studies from colleges and universities in New York City.
Exactly, and I tried to get that here, but I could never get the Georgia State to agree to it. Because I thought that would have been a great step, because our apprenticeship school was second to none, because we patterned it after several others that was very successful. But could never accomplish that, and that was one of my failings, I guess, that we couldn't put that across, because the university system was not that close to the labor movement, I guess, and but we kept the apprenticeship school up to date on all of the new techniques that developed in the meantime. I don't know if we're going to nanotechnologies now?
Yes.
I can't see them.
That's right. Well, the apprenticeship program at IBEW 613 is seen as a model for the entire building trades, and graduates of that apprenticeship program are quickly hired by union contractors for their skills, their ability, their dependability, And so that is a great deal to be proud of in terms of turning out thousands of highly skilled electricians in the Atlanta market.
That's true. It's true, and they still do, I hope.
Yes.
I hope they continue, and I hope the economy will continue to where we can continue to have that kind of training program and keep it updated. So,
As you reflect on this record of having the foresight to build a complex that included the office building, the IBEW auditorium, which is referred to as Labor's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and the IBEW apprenticeship program, you think of the foresight on building or the foresight with your apprenticeship program and the high standard it achieved and continues in terms of the legacy of Harry Bexley?
well, I always contended that the apprenticeship program was the most important factor of the whole setup of the IBEW, because after all, without them, down the road we were nothing. And it was a hard job way back on it to get the employers to recognize that situation. They were the drag on the whole system because they didn't want their employees having more knowledge about the industry than they had, which that was being the case because they were getting the ongoing techniques that they didn't get before they started in business. But we finally convinced them, and they started financing the school, and they finally saw where they was paying off great dividends of having highly trained people. And I used to chide them. I says, I should be a contractor myself. I should get a job and roll up the plans and hand them to a foreman, and he'll go put this job in. And that's what you people are doing as a result of the training that the electricians are getting today. You don't have to worry about the fine points on the job because they've been trained to put a job in. And I think the IBEW has been very successful over the country. I remember, Jim, you might remember, John Glenn speaking at the convention where he praised the IBEW for the job they did on the satellite that sent him to the moon, which I thought was a great accommodation for the IBEW. So, going back, we'll pick up on the benefit program that they now have at the IBEW. We did not have any insurance or pension, and that was a hard job to start. None of the building trades had insurance or pension. And the National Electrical Contractors Association, some of them had their own private plans for their employees. And I used to chide them. I said, if you have for them, why can't we have it for everybody? And they wanted to keep theirs because the people wanted to work for them because they had it. So I started the program to put in a pension plan and a health and welfare plan. We bogged down in negotiations. And we had quite a number of independent contractors that didn't belong to the National Association. So, I being a lawyer, I called a group of independents together. I said, I'm going to incorporate y'all into a separate association. They all agreed. So we developed the Atlanta Electrical Contractors Association, independent association. You can imagine how that went over with the rest of the employers. And said, now we will sign your contract for giving the employees the pension and health and welfare insurance. And that sent the National NECA, boy, they went in orbit. The National IBEW went in orbit. They all came to Atlanta. What's going on? So they met in the hotel, and they finally come out to the two groups, see, I'll get back to that in a minute. What it's going to take to settle this thing, because I threatened to take the bargain rights away from the NECA contractors. And they finally agreed at that meeting. We'll go with the pension plan and the health and welfare plan. And that was the starting. That was the first, I guess, health and welfare and pension plan we had in the building trades, except the plumbers had a pension plan, local, but they didn't have insurance. So the Associated General Contractors didn't like that. But nevertheless, that's the starting of the health and welfare industry, pension industry. Then it spread.
And what year, Harry? Do you remember approximately that this meeting took place, that you had?
It was in, I'd say 64, 65.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 63, in that area.
Sure.
Mhm.
So the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so you came into office, and now we've purchased land for the future of IBW's facilities. We have established a model apprenticeship program that still goes on today. And now in the early 1960s, through your planning, we're able to establish a health and welfare and pension fund that continues to provide benefits today, some 43 years later.
Oh, yes. They have improved on the pension plan. They have changed it somewhat. Before in 86, the economy was not on the best of solid ground. And I've become sort of fearful that what might happen to the pension plan. So we put it out for bid. The Board of Trustees, I convinced the Board of Trustees that perhaps maybe we should put this out for bid with an insurance company. And we did. We put the plan out for bid. The interest rate there, thanks to President Carter, it was the highest it was ever in the history. We sold the pension plan to this insurance company for a 10% return. Increased the benefits up to $20-something a month per year service, which was great. With widow's benefits and disability benefits and the whole works. And that's where it was when I left. And they, since then, have transferred to John Hancock, and they're administering that pension plan. Now they have a, I guess you might say, a 401k instead of the insurance pension plan, which is good. They still got a good plan. And the old people, a lot of the workers, are still covered under the old insurance plan. It provides a good living wage for a living condition for all of our retirees, and which I'm glad of.
Yes.
When I went in there, they didn't have anything. We had $50 a month pension and no insurance, and that was the extent of it. We had a death benefit fund of $2 a death, which was started when we had a great calamity at Kraft Cheese plant. We lost 5 electricians, and I don't know how many other craftsmen was lost there. A bulldozer hit a column and caused a collapse of the roof, killing those people and injuring quite a few others. And we started a death benefit fund at that time, and that was in 1949 that occurred. I guess that's the worst disaster we've had as far as construction death in the whole construction industry, as far as I know. And of course, that's still in effect. We had to, because the people didn't have anything. They collected something from the third-party injuries from that as a result of, but then we, that was later changed. It was increased later down the road. Now, some other activities that Jim is well of, that I was elected to the IEC, that's the International Executive Council, which is part of the executive board of the IBEW, International. In 1970, I believe, Seattle, Washington. And we, along with the help of Harry Van Arsdale, our national pension fund was 1%, national-wise, which provided, I think, $60 a month at that time. $3 a month per year's service, I believe it was, and maybe in that area. Maybe it could have been more, not much more. And Harry Van Arsdale and I used to chat the president of the IBEW then. Why should people like the IBEW and NECA contractors have such a small pension plan? So we'd do that at lunchtime with him, just he and I, because Harry Van Arsdale was a nagger. So we finally convinced him that we should go for the national increase in the national pension fund. So we'd have an annual meeting, trustees meeting of the NEBF. It was known then, the National Electrical Contractors Fund. And we was able to convince the contractor side of the board to go for increasing it up to 3%. Now that was quite a chore to do. And I enjoyed going over the country though, selling it. And I did. I never run across but two outfits. One of them was in Ohio that was really objective to it. Now California, because our rates were so high, they objected to it. But one district couldn't overcome the rest of the IBEW, so it was put into effect, which I thought was, at the time, I think we had probably not no more than $8 or $10 million in the fund. But in a few years it grew to, when I left,
10 billion plus.
10 billion plus, yes, billion fund.
Charlie Pollard.
10 billion with a B.
B,
Yeah.
B. One of the biggest pension funds in the country. And today, I think, what's the rate today? 24,
33, I think it is.
$33
Yeah.
a month.
And it's been
per
the
year's
same for a
service.
while.
And they can retire at 62 with full benefits.
Early
It's-
retirement is 6% reduction for each year. Wait a minute, no, 62 now is normal retirement.
No.
Yeah.
And Harry, you negotiated these improvements in pension funds were they jointly administered funds?
Jointly, yes, jointly administered.
And so
Trustees.
they were subject to approval of the trustees made up of the electrical contractors and
The IBEW.
IBEW. And so you had to come up with the grounds, reasons, and convincing arguments in which to have this action taken, and you were able to do so not only locally but nationwide.
I was part of it. We had a good team, and we had the president of NECA was a former member of the IBEW,
Is that Autry?
Autry.
Yeah.
Autry. Great guy. He was he was president of NECA.
Buck
National NECA.
Autry. He went by Buck.
Buck Autry.
Buck Autry, yeah.
He could pick the guitar too. And he was quite an entertainer. But he says, "I'll make the motion if you'll second it." It was in our meeting. Now we had Pollard was the president of NECA then, but I got chastised, but I didn't care. He made a motion that we do raise it for 2%. A lot of people don't know about this. But I seconded the motion right off. Well, I made the motion, and he seconded it. And the contractor went through them like that. But after a lot of discussion, it was carried. And each one of the IEC members was assigned a district to sell. You had to sell the membership as well as the contractors. He had to sell the contractors, and we had to sell the IBEW on taking the increases that they might have coming to put it into that NEBF fund. Of course, we took ours in Atlanta. We withdrew. We withheld 2% from the increase that we got for the wages. We put it into the NEBF fund. The contractors took advantage of the 2%. As a result, we reduced our.
And I would insert there that those are some bad years in Florida, for instance. We had extended our agreement with no increases, but yet because of the NEBF, we got a 2% increase the first of the year in the mid of a one-year contract, which we had extended for a year, which is like 2% just fell off the tree. Now, one of the things they used to sell it, though, was they did put standardized shift work in the agreements all over the country. There were a lot of locals that already had that, so it wasn't like it was an across-the-board big thing. And then even funnier, that some of the other reward that they gave themselves was theoretically all of the contractors would be paying into a 1% into NECA nationwide. That was found to be illegal, and they lost it. So we got the 2% literally for nothing.
Well, that was quite a feat. That was a big nationwide program. And another program that we, for the IEC, was a national what do you call the program? Where we take our money from one, what do we call that?
Did they transfer funds, or
Yes,
did they
we call
convert? Was it a conversion?
They took wherever you worked didn't matter. The funds would follow the guy.
Yes.
Go back to his home local.
Oh, yeah, portability.
Portability.
Not
Yeah.
portability,
Well,
reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Portability is another big
Yeah,
thing, by
yeah.
the way, but reciprocity.
Yeah. That was a great step because there's so much transitory work between the different local unions, different cities and everything. They would leave and they would lose their home, the health and welfare and their pension plans at home while working in another area. So that was a hard sell.
We just interject a couple of things. One, Mr. Jim Welton, business manager from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is here with us, and the prior comments about the 2% increase were from Mr. Welton. As we look at reciprocity in the electrical industry, there are what's referred to as travelers, where there is a big job, where they're in need of skilled electricians, be it the building of the World Congress Center here in Atlanta or a new building in New York City. A call would go out for travelers, and then people from different locals throughout the United States would go to where the call was from.
Correct.
And so prior to this policy change of reciprocity, people could possibly lose the contributions and coverage of the health and welfare fund from their home local. Was that the situation?
That's correct. That is absolutely correct.
And so this policy change allowed the individual electricians to retain their coverage and what they had earned.
Correct.
And maintain their health and welfare, too. Very important.
That was a hard
Tremendous
sell because a lot of the local unions take that float from the travelers in there. So that was one great thing I think that international, while I was on the board, we accomplished. Let's see, and there was another program that we Wasn't it another program that we put into effect, reciprocity, and then
I can't think of any others as significant as the ones we just discussed.
Well,
Harry, I want to ask you about a couple of things in terms of Georgia, and then we'll certainly get back to any of those other larger policies. But Harry Bexley is reported to have called a meeting when he was business manager of IBEW 613. And he had everyone in that auditorium and told all of those assembled electricians that it is our policy at Local 613 to make sure that we offer a good day's work for a full day's wages. And people still talk about that 30 years later as being one of the keys to IBEW 613's success and for establishing its reputation for productivity and quality. Can you talk about your role in that session and how you insisted that IBEW 613 members meet those high standards?
I'm glad you brought that up. We worked pretty close with the contractors representative, the chapter manager, and he and I had good relationship on any of the programs that we established. We always worked together on those programs, and we had started a weekly note out to all of the employees. We called it Charlie Channel Locks, or Perry Plies. It was later named by some of the naysayers Charlie Channel Locks. But it was Perry Plies that we patented it. We had a little emblem. You might see them with the Perry Plies. And that was the Perry Plies note every week we'd put in the envelope. And we, as a result, we established a fair day's work for a fair day's pay.
I'm going to go to the men's room.
Yes, sir.
Be back in a bit. Got water, I guess.
So that kept the employees that didn't attend the meetings up to date on what was going on in the electrical industry. So communication is a great asset to any organization, is communication. There's another program that
You negotiated contracts, both wages and benefits, etc., but you faced the challenge of having union contractors accepted in a very competitive market here in Atlanta and in the South. And you comment on some of the programs and initiatives that you used.
Yes, we set up different rates for different type of work, which was a ongoing program. It wasn't quite accepted with international by us doing this, but of course we lived in a different area with a right to work state, and our conditions down south was not like them up at north, and we had to do things that our employers could be competitive. So we always tried to keep our employers in a competitive position. So we set up different rates, like the residential rates and maintenance rates and whatnot, that they could compete. Reporting time and travel time we did away with, and in order to compete. You want to stop just for a minute? We'll collect that.
Sure. Harry, you served as counsel for the Georgia State AFL, both the Georgia AFL, and then you were there and present at the establishment of the Georgia State AFL-CIO. Can you talk about your role as a labor official in the Georgia labor movement?
Well, I thought it was a great day when the AFL-CIO merged. We were like two separate organizations. We were two separate, politically and otherwise. Generally speaking, most of our politics was divided, which was not good for either side. But it brought together the family that it should have never split. But nevertheless, it did. And the present day is fixing to do the same thing. But in Brunswick, Georgia, I don't know, I forget the year, the merger took place with the labor movement. And that was quite a convention. There was a lot of horse trading for the officers that lead the Georgia State AFL-CIO. And the back rooms at night was quite lively. And we had to reach a consensus of dividing up the officials of the Georgia State AFL-CIO with each other. And once we reached that consensus, it was not hard to complete the merger. I think we all agreed to support their candidate, and they agreed to support our candidate that we agreed on. So, I forget now who was late. It's been so long ago. I don't know where it was. Bill Setti. That name ring a bell? We'd have to do the research, but
Sure.
We started our political program there. We started the Labor's League for Political Education, which was a great step forward. The LLPE had full-time director. I think she was a machinist, by the way, that headed up that LLPE. They started a big registration program, get out the vote program, telephone programs, and we really had I think a great political arm of the Georgia State AFL-CIO, and that was the upcoming of our political strength. However, by representing the AFL-CIO, we had a meeting. I'll tell you a little story about Mayor Hartsfield.
Yes.
Remember that name?
Yes, of course.
He had done something that the Atlanta Labor Council didn't like. So I went with the group to meet with Mayor Hartsfield. And Bill Setti, I think, was the president of the building trades, probably. And we went over, we had a meeting with Mayor Hartsfield. And Bill Setti got pretty feisty with the mayor. And you'd have to know Hartsfield, he didn't take anything off anybody. He was on his own. And he says, Mr. Setti, let me give you a little story here. Says, you were boasting about you go beat me in the next election and all that. So let me tell you some facts. He says, we've done some research too. Half your membership don't live in the city of Atlanta. And the half that lives in Atlanta not registered to vote. And the half that is registered to vote ain't gonna vote like you tell them to. I I'll never forget that.
God protect us from people who look. Check the record.
That was quite a story, and
That rings so true in many places.
it does, and it still rings true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we had quite a few successes. President Carter, when he was governor, Carter, I think he did a great job as governor. And I always enjoyed going in there with the bills. I learned at the first meeting when you better go home and do your homework. And it didn't take long for me to know what I had to do when you go before Governor Carter. Because he could pick a bill to death right there, and he can ask some questions, pointed questions that what governor would have gone through those bills and asked such questions. But I learned quick that I had to do my homework before we went in to talk with him. So Georgia's a unique state. Today we're, I guess, 75% Republican. But in true, way back when, I think we had a lot of closet Democrats that were Republicans way back. Herb Mabry used to chide them and says that we should start supporting the Republicans and forget some of you Democrats. And what he was saying was so true. We still had a lot of solid Democrat people here that really represent the Democrat Party as we would like to know it. But even with the full Democrat Party over the years, Labor did not achieve very much. When I first started, when I was practicing law, I think the rate was raised up to maybe $25 a week per service. As in the workers' compensation, the unemployment was probably less than that a week. And we couldn't get the South Georgia politician to agree to raise it. And we had George T. Smith, who was a great statesman. Was we developed him into a great spokesman, I think, for the working men and women of this state. He took the bull by the horns, and with several other representatives we had, we were able to make a lot of significant changes in both the unemployment law and the workers' compensation law. So it started from there, and it's up to where it is now, I guess. We've got increases over the years, but
Well, I want to ask you about some of the elected officials that you had dealings with, and just to get some of Harry Bexley's experience. You mentioned Governor Carter, and of course he was preceded by Governor Carl Sanders. And so I'm just curious about Harry Bexley's evaluation of some of Georgia's governors.
well, Governor Sanders was a okay guy. We had good relationship with Governor Sanders, and of course Carter defeated Sanders, which it didn't matter with us at that point in time which one got elected, because both of them were about the same, equal, as far as labor was concerned. But now, Carl Sanders did not get out, roll up his sleeves, and work the people like Carter did. Carter was out every morning with his shirt sleeves and hand-building plants and job sites and whatnot, and it paid off for him. And he was elected. And of course, Carl got the name Cufflink Carl. And that didn't bode well at the election time. So the working people in the state, I think, voted for Carter.
For Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy
yes.
Carter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course we had Lester Maddox. Tell you a story about Lester Maddox. He was, while a certain segment of our society did not like Lester, and rightfully so maybe, in some areas, but in some areas they were off key. While he was governor, he employed more minority people than any other governor before him. Put a large number on the state patrol, a lot of them in government, state government offices and whatnot. And we was locked down with a contract at Westinghouse in Athens. And been off for about 30 days. I had employed all of the men on construction jobs, and they didn't want to go back to work because they were making more work in construction than for electricians at the transformer plant in Athens, Westinghouse. So Governor Maddox says, we've got to settle that contract. I says, okay, what do you suggest? He said, bring them up in my office and we'll settle it. So we got the whole group, the negotiating management and labor both in his office. He said, I'm locking the door and we're not leaving here until this contract's settled. That was Lester Maddox. He said, I'll send out and get the chicken or hamburgers, whichever one you want. And that they did. But by midnight, he had settled that contract. That was Lester Maddox.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was quite something for him. And I had the pleasure, we went to Israel with Lester on the first trip he had going out of the United States. And he was quite an entertainer. He fascinated those people over there riding that bicycle backwards. They'd never seen anybody like that, and he really was an entertainer. Quite a guy, his wife as well. We enjoyed the trip very much with a group, with him leading the group, and I learned a lot about him during that trip. And on our building trades, I mean, we used to have a building trades meeting once a year in Washington, and where the delegates would meet with the senators and the congressmen up there to discuss
We still do.
labor bills.
Mm-hmm.
And Senator Russell was our senior senator here then. And I guess Herman Talmadge was the other senator at the same time, but the C-47 was being talked about developing at that time because of the Cold War at that time. So none of our group wanted to go meet with Senator Russell. But I had a good relationship with Senator Russell. We went into the shrine together on the cold class, and I had good rapport with Senator Russell. And I persuaded President J. Moore, I believe he was president of Atlanta Labor Council or the state. I believe he was Secretary of State, the AFL-CIO. He agreed he'd go with me with Senator Russell. So we went down to his office, and he was glad to see us in open arms and wasn't very congenial. And we was in his office, and his secretary come on the line and says, Secretary of Defense McNamara was on the phone, should have put him through. In his gruff voice, if you ever knew him, he says, put him through. And of course we couldn't hear McNamara's voice, but we knew what he must have said. And Senator Russell replied, so if that C-47 is built, it's going to be built in Marietta, Georgia. Lockheed will build it in that terms. So he's told us, well, we don't know where the plane's going to be built, but if it's built, he told us that it's going to be built in Marietta. Mm-hmm. And it was. And it was contracted out the big addition up there to build the C-47 was non-union. And they was on recess when the judge had let the contract. He was in Wanda, Georgia. And I told George Cordell, he was president of the building trades.
Yes.
I said, George, let's go talk to Senator Russell. Now, he ain't gonna help us. I said, let's go talk to him anyway. So we rode to Wanda, Georgia, and we called him, set up the meeting, glad to come. Went over there, and we, had good conversation, side talks, all that stuff, and we told him our mission. He said, well, I don't know if I can be of any help to you or not, but, when that contract was drawn up, it had to be done real fast. And I put a terrific penalty clause in that contract. Several $1,000s a day for every day it's not completed on schedule. And we talked on. And on the way home, George said, I told you he wasn't going to tell us anything. I said, George, you must not have been listening. You didn't hear him say he put that several $1,000s a day penalty on that job that wasn't completed? Yeah. I said, wasn't he telling you something? He told me something. He said, let's go home and do it. And they put a building trades picket up the next day or the next week. And it's bring the job up. As a result of that big penalty from that job not being completed. And the rest of the job went 100% union. I thought that was quite a treat for Senator Russell.
But again, I'm seeing a pattern of Harry Bexley and creatively using either blank picket signs or pickets to achieve a goal that all comes back to the quality and productivity of the skilled, trained electrician.
Correct.
Back to our governors for a moment. Was it Governor Busby that then followed Governor Maddox? George Busby of Albany?
Probably, yes.
And then,
He was okay. He was okay. I think he pointed me to the, we had a judiciary study committee to change the judicial section of the Constitution. And I was honored to be appointed on that committee, along with George T. Smith and Dorothy Beasley. You remember?
yes, I do.
Dorothy Beasley. And I think Snow for the Pardon Parole Board was on the committee. There's about 5 of us on the committee. And that's how the judges got to be nonpartisan, and I made the motion. I tried to get the district attorneys included in it, but I could not get that. But George T. Smith and I went together, and with our input, we were able to get the election of judges on a nonpartisan basis, which I thought was good. And they represent both parties, so they should not have to be partisan to be elected.
Governor Busby is reported to have appointed a number of labor officials to different boards and commissions during his administration.
I'm sure he must have, yes. Red Etheridge
Yes.
was appointed by him on the labor board. Of course, he reappointed Carter when the Director of Workers' Compensation Board, when Judge Buckner died. He'd been there, or retired, I guess he retired. Governor Carter called me and wanted us to make recommendations to fill the job. And I thought, and I finally, come across to me that we had Don Knowles, member IBEW, was a lawyer, district attorney down in Henry County. I said, I bet George would like that job. And I called him. And that was a great call for him. And we called Governor Carter. And I think Don maybe had been on the legislature. But he appointed Don Knowles as a director. And that was a great appointment for us and the state as well, because Don did a good job. A long time.
Yes, sir.
He retired from there.
Yes, and that tradition continues today. The Ronnie Connor is an EW electrician and a lawyer who is an attorney with the Workers' Compensation
Right,
Board.
correct. And I got him accepted in Georgia State University. He couldn't get in. They wouldn't let him in. And I went to, who was the chancellor, the president? Yeah,
Noah Langdale?
Langdale.
Mm-hmm.
It was through him that we got Connor accepted in the law school here.
So that tradition that you started of an IBEW Local 613 electrician also being a lawyer has carried on for over 40 years.
Correct, correct.
And then, of course, then Governor Joe Frank Harris and Governor Zell Miller, Governor Roy Barnes, and our current governor.
Zell Miller, we thought, was the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, the Griffin-Landrum bill came to play during all of this, which increased the veracity against labor and caused us a lot of heartaches. And Zell Miller was, I don't know what, he was a senator or whatnot, but we wanted to run him against Landrum up in that district. That's where Zell was from. And we raised money like you wouldn't believe. And I ain't put a staff full time putting up signs. And stole postage stamps, so to speak. We got donation postage stamps to put out mail outs for him. We did everything we could. Some legal, some illegal. And that we could get by with to help him get elected. But the stolen election, as far as I'm concerned, is the ballot box up in North Georgia. They wasn't watching the ballot boxes, and he lost by a few votes. And of course, then we support him when he's lieutenant governor, lock, stock, and barrel. That's everything we could do to make sure he was elected, and we always did support him. And then when he ran for governor, we supported him. And when he was appointed senator, that was the stone that broke the old camel's back. We could not, labor cannot, and a lot of other people cannot even justify, see how he could turncoat against the people that supported him over the years as they did. It was just unthinkable that he would do to the people that made great sacrifices for him. So, but that's a story of politics anyway.
Yeah, some have said that it is the lure of power and the need to get attention that caused former Governor Miller to take a different approach, and it clearly was a different approach than what his career had been here in Georgia.
It certainly was. It was just a complete turnaround. That was one great mistake that Barnes made. I think Governor Barnes was you want to put them all together, bar none. As far as labor was concerned, Barnes was the best governor in my era that was ever over there. That's just my opinion, of course.
Roy Barnes asked how he was going to be able to establish policies in the state of Georgia to make union contractors more competitive in bids. He provided access to labor organizations on state property and state facilities to speak to employees. That was unprecedented. That had never been done before.
Right.
And Roy Barnes knew who his friends were and wanted to make sure that they received the full consideration for the work they sought to do.
He was one of the most astute representatives we had in the legislature at that time. George Bagby, remember George Bagby?
Yes.
Was another staunch supporter of labor. His mother worked in the in the textile mills, and he was a great representative. And we had some from Savannah, Georgia. Chatham County was supportive of organized labor, and we get the names of them. And we had a number of them around here that were supportive of the causes of the working men and women, not just organized people. We're not talking about organized, we're talking about generally the working men and women of this state.
Harry, some of the labor leaders that you worked with over your career as a labor official, you saw the coming of age of a carpenter by the name of Herb Mabry that went on to be the longest serving president of the Georgia State AFL-CIO. Can you comment on some of the leaders that you worked with and their impact on Georgia?
Well, getting back to Herb, Herb was a result of the support of the IBEW. We over an IBEW member, J.W. Giles. And of course, I was a mainspring because I was president of the Georgia Electrical Workers and whatnot. And J.W. was a good guy, but he had some problems that I won't go into. But we just thought that Herb would do a better job than J.W. And we, J.W. was the businessman of '84 at that time. And he just couldn't understand the IBEW supporting a carpenter to be president of the Georgia State AFL-CIO. And he was very bitter about it, but we did it anyway. We thought Herb would do the better job. We didn't go for the individual, for what organization they were from. And from then on, the IBEW always supported Herb Mabry because he was capable. He had some law training. He didn't finish his law school, but he had enough training to, I think, make a good leader for the state as a whole, and which I'm glad we did. But we was able to get J.W. the job with the safety inspector for the federal, the OSHA. We was able to get him that job. I went to the head of it in Washington. I personally did. And we got the International to go along to get J.W. that job, and he kept it until he fell off the wagon, so to speak.
He was business manager for IBEW Local
84.
84 that represented Georgia power workers,
Correct.
linemen and such.
Correct.
Yes.
So
Herb Mabry, as a member of the building trades, spoke on behalf of the building trades and all other workers that were represented by affiliated unions of the AFL-CIO. And Harry, you served as counsel for the Georgia State AFL-CIO for, I believe, the entire term
Correct.
that Herb Mabry was president of the
Correct.
state Fed.
correct. And it was enjoyable. We had good relationship, and I would smoke all of the bills over all of them and different other matters that come up. and we had good relations all the time. But, by and large, all the labor leaders, not just single out one or two, but I think, generally speaking, the entire group of all the labor leaders in the state of Georgia that I've ever known were all upright Christian leaders, and really represented the people that they represented in a fashion that anybody could be proud of if they knew them, and their capabilities and their moral standards and whatnot. They was, I don't know of one that, of all the group, and that's a large group of them over the state, that I can't think of a one maybe that ever got in any kind of trouble, far exceeded the ministry in that case.
Now, you were...
And the bankers.
And the bankers. You were counsel to the state AFL-CIO when Martha True was elected as Secretary-Treasurer, and it was rare, I think, at that time that a woman would be elected to a statewide office for a state labor federation.
That is correct, and they made a great choice when they elected Martha True. She was a true labor representative from the CWA, and she had the respect of all of the elected officials, and she did a terrific job as being secretary to the Georgia State AFL-CIO. I hated when she retired, that she completely retired. I have not seen her since. Haven't had any contact with her, and she hadn't had any contact later. I don't know why. But
was it 1972 that Martha True was elected as Secretary-Treasurer?
Possible.
In the early mid-70s. And so,
She was there for a long time.
Yes.
She was a long time. She was quite a worker.
And so you had a building trades representative president, and then someone representing an industrial union as Secretary-Treasurer, giving you the balance between the AFL and CIO.
They kept the balance, and I hate to see the labor movement break up like it is in Washington. Because, you know, I think the leadership of the AFL-CIO hadn't been, since George Meany left, I don't think it's been what it should have been.
Say it again.
Since then.
Kirkland
I'm
was
not
a
surprised that some of the
16-year waste.
organizations have chose to go a different road. Of course, IBEW is still with the AFL-CIO. There's been a leadership in it over many years.
Well, on that point, of course, George Meany retired, replaced by Lane Kirkland, succeeded by Lane Kirkland.
Right.
And then there was the contest between Tom Donohue and John Sweeney. And, of course, Sweeney was the challenger, and now we see John Sweeney is facing the same sort of challenge that he posed to the establishment of the AFL-CIO.
That goes around, comes around, doesn't it?
Well, it is ironic.
It is.
Yes.
It is. It is. But I tell you, the present administration we have in Washington today is what he couldn't get through the courts and his executive orders. He has done by opening the floodgates to illegal immigrants coming in this country. He has saturated the labor market with illegal aliens, taking over the jobs of the American workers. And I think it's devastating to us, not just today, but I say 5 or 10 years from now. It's going to affect the working men and women in this country for a long time to come. It's devastating. I didn't say legal, I said illegal.
Yes.
So what George Bush couldn't do with a pen, he's done it from opening the floodgates for illegals coming into this country to do the job that he knew to crush the working men and women in this country, bring us down to a third-rate country, which is fast becoming I see it.
Profoundly negative effect in existence right now, and it's been going on since '86. I mean, happens to be one of my favorite subjects, and I'm a bit of an expert on it. Harry, you'd be happy to hear that I had lunch with President, our great president of the International Union there. He is doing a remarkable job in a lot of ways, but he told me that he is going to come out with a much higher profile in opposition to granting amnesty to illegal aliens. His exact words was, "That's a bunch of fucking bullshit." That was, and the IBEW is going to be very soon, and he's already began, coming out much stronger on the situation. And he's fighting a great deal with the building trades, Sullivan and the laborers. It's the only one he mentioned at the time, but it's a serious, serious problem. And it's going to nothing but get worse.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in January of this year, we had the report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing that labor's membership declined by over 350,000 members from 2005 to 2006. That in the private sector, approximately 9% of the workforce is organized, whereas in the public sector, it's 37% of the public sector workforce is organized. The highest rate of unionization is among public safety workers, police officers, and firefighters, with teachers close behind. Do you see those trends continuing, and what do you see as the prospects for organized labor in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, you can reasonably understand those statistics because they're not English speaking, and those jobs that you're talking about are still there is because of the language difference in them and the illegality of them taking the jobs, which they would certainly be caught and deported in those type jobs. That's different from the construction industry and the other industry, which is no, to my knowledge, nothing in effect now to keep them from being on the jobs. And you couldn't go on a construction job today probably and find a legal worker on them because we don't have the enforcement people to do it. And then what would they do if they found them? They have sort of like the border industry when they got those 2 border patrol in jail. That's the most sickening thing I've ever heard in my life. That this administration we got would let something like that happen to the people in this country. And this is what we're confronted with, and what's going to be the outcome? Who knows? The outsourcing, the importation of illegal immigrants, it's going to be horrendous to the working men and women of this country, other than short order clerks and cooks. I don't know. You've got to have a master's degree or a doctor's degree to exist in the future as I see it. Just plain college is not going to do it. You've got to go beyond the college degree in order to maintain a middle class status in the future. Unless we can turn it around with the next election, which is going to be interesting to see how it pans out.
Some recent decisions by the National Labor Relations Board in terms of who is in the bargaining unit and who isn't, and how this is going to affect the building and construction trades in terms of supervisors or lead persons.
That is correct. And of course, I don't know the details of that ruling. I have not kept up with it since I've retired, and but I can see the repercussions of it, removing the leadership of the jobs out of the unit, so to speak. And I don't know where it's going to leave us.
Some have speculated that union members would not take the lead position if they are going to be removed from the bargaining unit, because that would remove the protections of the contract that they enjoy.
That's correct. That is correct. However, with IBEW, we've always included up to a superintendent in our bargaining group. And we'd like to include them too. In fact, our employers are under our health and welfare plan. Their staff, them and their staff are under our health and welfare plan. I put them under that because, after all, you know, they may be part of it. They're not going to object to increasing or improving it. And
Sure.
so it's a good idea to have them under the plan as well. Let their employees, the office force, be under the same plan. So there was a, in reciprocity we had this, there's another program. The referral procedure in the IBEW is a standard referral procedure. Was put into effect by the Legal Counsel of Washington, D.C. I forget the guy's name, but what is it, Jim, you know?
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Initially, before
Yeah.
I've been business manager,
Yeah.
it's been standard.
He put that, he drafted this law and got it approved by the National Labor Relations Board and whatnot, and it was put into effect all over the country by making groups. Group 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the way they would be referred out on the unemployed list. And that was causing, prior to that, was causing a lot of problems with the National Labor Relations Board. And this national law, the effect that he put in the contract all over the country, stopped all those charges from the National Labor Relations Board by following that group 1, 2, and 3, and 4 program. Was another good program that they put into. Well,
It's one of the mainstays, actually, of the basis of the respect that the members have for the IBEW. The International Construction Union has got to do with that referral procedure. It's honestly administered. They have a lot of faith in it, as they well should, because it is well handled, actually.
Sure. That is the lifeblood in terms of their activity and their employment.
Sure.
Yeah. But it is the IBEW who came up with the policy that has stood the test of time.
right.
And I think that's the key point. When we do have workers that are given a voice and can have input into policies by effective representatives, we can get a good result that stands the test of time and achieves equity for workers and provides a quality employee to an employer. Harry, when did you retire as business manager?
1988.
And
And from the IEC, it was 91. I was on the IEC for 21 years, I believe.
And you have received a number of accolades and awards, including having the IBEW Auditorium, which has been referred to as the town hall of the labor movement in Atlanta and the Southeast. You're a member of the Labor Hall of Fame. You received the Labor Awards Committee Lifetime Achievement Award. For all of those things, what are some of the things that you are most proud of over your long career with the labor movement?
When I was admitted to the United States Supreme Court.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was quite an ordeal. There was only Senator Russell wasn't a member of it, and he was a great lawyer, but he didn't have to. Neither was Herman Talmadge. And Davis, Congressman Davis from Decatur, You remember that name?
Mm-hmm.
James Davis,
Yes.
which was not a fond person of ours, but he was the only one that was a member of the Supreme Court, and it had to be a member of the Supreme Court to introduce somebody else to the Supreme Court. And he took the job. He was glad to do it, and I was glad he did it. And that was in 1970, I believe. I don't know, maybe before then.
So you were admitted to practice before the United States
Yes,
Supreme Court.
yes.
And,
But
so-
the others was just as well, down on the ground level was, all of them was important.
So if Senator Richard Russell needed a lawyer to represent him before the Supreme Court, he could call on Harry Bexley.
He was a great guy, though.
Well, people have said that it was the foresight of Harry Bexley to put the land together to build what is now the IBEW complex. It was the foresight of Harry Bexley to establish the pension and health and welfare funds that continues to benefit people today. It was the foresight of Harry Bexley to insist on high standards for workers that has allowed IBEW to remain competitive as perhaps the top building trades union in the state of Georgia. And you comment on that, Harry, and the pride you must have in people recognizing your insight, your vision, and your ability to achieve those things.
Well, I don't feel like I've done enough. That's my feeling. Maybe I've failed in a lot of areas. I should have done more. Mm-hmm. There's one phase that maybe we ought to touch on. That's the Journal of Labor. Mm-hmm. That was our only communication we had. Leola Laster. I guess she ought to be on the board out there somewhere. She was having to retire and was going to lose the Journal of Labor. And I thought that was a great asset for the labor movement in the state of Georgia, was the Journal of Labor. It'd been there since Centro Kendrick, which was her husband originally, ran the paper way back when the labor movement really started. And she held on to it as long as she could, and then she came up in office one day and says, I've got to give up the Journal of Labor. And of course, I didn't like the idea, and she says, I don't know what to do with it. I said, well, Leola, what do you want for the paper? I said, I can persuade the IBEW to buy the paper, and we'll give it to the Georgia State AFL-CIO. And she set a price, and we paid her the price for the Journal of Labor. And we gave it to the Georgia State AFL-CIO, Herb Mabry. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's the paper. It's yours. And Herb run it as long as he could financially, because so many of the local unions wanted their own communication rather than the paper. And of course, he couldn't take. Your ads become a problem in publishing the paper, and so I don't know how many years Herb kept it running, but he kept it running as long as he could financially.
Right.
And I hated to see it go down the tube, because it was a great arm of the labor movement.
Right. As you said earlier, that communication is such an important part of any
Exactly right.
organization.
That's key to everything is communication, and the right communication.
Sure.
And she tried to give him the right communication in her paper.
Sure.
It was a great paper, very well respected. Because all the politicians were on the mailing list.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Harry, is there anything else that you want to touch upon in terms of your career, or other things that you've seen in terms of issues affecting working people and the labor movement here in Georgia?
Well, state of Georgia, we need a terrific registration program. We need a communication program that we don't have at this point, or the financing to communicate that which we need to communicate with the working, not just the organized worker, but the working men and women of this state that really needs support in our government here. I don't know how they can address that, but we've got to get back to the ballot box for our survival. So, not right off.
Well,
I've enjoyed
politics. Yes, sir.
my interview with us. I've relived a lot of years. A lot of stuff I probably could put in, but won't. Couldn't. There are some areas that you don't talk about, I guess, in any industry.
Well, we want to. I want to thank Harry Bexley for agreeing to sit today for this oral history interview, which is part of the Voices of Labor project sponsored by the Southern Labor Archives at the Georgia State University Library.
And I was glad to have Jim Weldon come as our guest because Jim has been my friend for umpteen years, and he was happened to be a meeting here in Atlanta today. And thanks, Jim, for coming over and participating in this.
What a stroke of luck it was. I turned around and there you were, and here I am here. The business we got's taking care of itself well. I have an organizer here with me that's out working, and certainly it's my pleasure and honor to be sitting here, Harry. You're a great man.
Of course, I still work with Ken.
Yes,
Still practicing law.
that's right. So this talk of retirement, that was an error.
I just changed hats.
So you continue to practice law today.
Yes, I like to do estate work. That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the lawyers don't retire; they just lose their appeal, as you know.
I see. I'm told that you still represent clients in traffic court, and you represent others on personal business before.
Not traffic court. I don't go no more. That
I
ain't
see.
worth the time. I tell them, you go down there and plead your case.
I've got to tell a story on you if I can, Harry, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This was maybe 20 years ago, and I have a member call me. He got himself in real trouble in one of the outlying cities here close to Atlanta, and got in trouble big time with the sheriff, an argument. He ends up arrested and handcuffs and the whole bit. He calls me up, Jim, I'm in real trouble here. What can you do? I called up Harry Bexley. He took the information, and about 2 hours later, he was released from jail. Harry got in his car and drove wherever it was to. I don't know exactly where it was at. Took care of the problem. Completely. It was finished. He was released and allowed to go. And Harry did that.
And I backed into a lady down at the restaurant, too. You was there.
Yeah, that was very good, too. We're having lunch, and we're leaving, and Harry's just backing out, and this woman comes through the place very fast. And basically, Harry ran into her. And he gets out of the car and immediately takes the offensive. Pardon me, but weren't you moving rather fast? You know, that kind of a thing. It totally took the heart out of her. And it worked out real good, too. That was good. But
Let me tell you another story about Senator Russell.
Yes, sir.
You know, a lot of people don't know what goes on in these political offices. This lady called me on the phone, and I guess it was during the Vietnam War. And her only son, she didn't have no more. She called me and says, he's on the boat in San Francisco and they're fixing to ship out to Vietnam. Is there anything you can do? I said, ma'am, I don't know how in the world I could. He's on the boat and he's going to leave. She said, well, he's the only one I got. I got nothing else left. I said, well, let me see what I can do. I get on the phone with Senator Russell. I didn't take one of his aides. I got him, and I told him the story. He says, well, let me see what I can do. The next day, we got this communication. This boy was called up by the captain of the ship. Now, fixing to leave the next day. This boy was scared to death. The captain of the ship calling him up to his quarters. It says, go get your belongings. You're not going on this boat. You're leaving. But I don't know what in the world's going on. Senator Russell had called that. He was Secretary of Defense. he got that boy off the ship and got him home. Now
Well, when
that's-
you're chairman of the Armed Services Committee, people pay attention when you call.
I thought that was something, and that boy couldn't understand what was going on. He was scared to death.
Sure.
He come in the office, and he wasn't a member. Well, maybe his dad used to be. He says, "I want to thank you." He says, "I don't know how you did it." I said, "Well, don't worry about how I did it. Just be thankful you got it." And I never forget that Senator Russell had a heart, as well as other stuff.
Your ability to establish relationships with people from a variety of walks of life, from senior U.S. senators to governors, but to members, and not only members, but children of members, is a consistent theme of your career. And those relationships that you've established have paid dividends for you, for your organization, but the greatest beneficiary has been the people you've represented.
Well, that was the main part of the whole works, for the people you help. Interesting meeting I attended with Harry Van Alsdale in New York, I guess it was. No, it was in Washington, D.C., with General Chiang Kai-shek's wife. Van Alsdale had some kind of a meeting with him. He said, "I want you to come along." And I got to meet her. She was quite a lady. So, and the president of Poland, I can't pronounce his name.
Lech Walesa.
Lex, that's right. Now, I met him on several, I was on first name speaking with him when he was elected. Well, before he was elected, I was in Poland, and he was running then, and the guide on our bus, she was telling us about him, and I said, "Well, he's an electrical worker. I hope he's elected, you know." And she said, "Well, we think we're going to elect him," and he was. And soon after he was elected, he came to New York. And I met him there with Van Arsdale. And then later again, I met him in Washington. He came to the FLCI meeting, which I was a delegate to that meeting. And I got to meet him again, and of course he remembered. And lo and behold, the city of Avondale, Howard Osofsky, our associate, legal associate with Ken, and was sponsoring the Polish. See, he was Jewish, Polish Jewish, and he sponsored the Polish delegate to the Olympics. And he had Les come here, and we had a meeting with him with the our county commissioner. What's her name? The cab. The lady
Leanne Levitan.
Levitan. She was at the meeting, and we had it over at one of the hotels. And he still remembers. It was great meeting him again. And,
Yes, sir.
we had our picture made. He wanted to have his picture made.
Just electrician to electrician.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I think that's probably a good note to end our session today. And Harry, again, I want to thank you for coming in and adding to the Voices of Labor Oral History Project here at Georgia State. And Jim, thank you for your contributions as well.
It's my pleasure to be here, and remarkable day, a remarkable day.